I'm going to start reading. Remember, they're on the hunt for Will because we just found JJ and Liza because they had the raft boat. Like, they've been eating real food and everyone else has been eating coconuts. Will's still MIA, but his brain is still going crazy. But he heard the people talking about Liza, and it's just crazy times. Remember, there's killers on the island. JJ still thinks that this is all set up and that they're perfectly fine. I think JJ's crazy, but that's besides the point. So we're gonna get 2 chapters done today. Chapter 11, day 4, 9:45 p.m. Luke shone the beam of flashlight at the survival pack. Just that simple act seemed like a miracle. Only yesterday, the setting of the sun had signified the end of all activity on the island. Darkness was final, total. Now, they had artificial light, courtesy of the inflatable raft. While JJ and Ian had searched for Will, Luke and the girls had moved the covered lifeboat from the small cove where it was on the beach to a spot just inside the trees at the castaways' camp. It wasn't easy to maneuver such a bulky object through heavy jungle. It had to be rolled, carried, squeezed, and sometimes tossed. But it was all worth it when Luke took the cover off the survival pack. We're rich, he breathed. No, this was much better than money. Conveniences: small aluminum pots, pans, plates, plastic cups and cutlery, compass, knife, lighter, waterproof matches, first aid kit, fishing line, and hooks. There it was, macaroni and cheese. A hole opened in his stomach. Fruit could keep them from starving, but this was real food. Too big, the label pack read. Serves 10. He had an insane desire to bite into the package, straight through the shrink wrap. Ha! The others would kill him, and they'd be right. He set it back in the survival kit. There was their last meal, their safety net. They had to preserve it for when they were really desperate. He heft the Okay, so now they have matches, so they can just start a fire easily. And they have pots and pans and stuff, so even if it didn't rain, they would be able to boil salt water so they could drink it. They have a knife now. You can sit there. They have a knife now. Man, this survival pack, JJ and Liza have been having it a little bit easier than the other 4. Well, other 3, because who knows? Will's lost his mind. He hurled the raft's water keg. It was almost empty, but it would still come in handy. In the coconut shells, the rainwater was always mostly evaporated by the time they got around to drinking it. Now they had a reservoir that could close. That would be a big help. Keep us alive so we can die here, he thought suddenly, or be murdered. That was the ongoing battle. Luke's brains versus his morals. He got through the days by setting realistic goals for himself. Find food, find water, keep looking for Will. 2 shipmates you'd written off as dead showed up today, he reminded himself. If that won't keep your spirits up, nothing will. He sighed. These days, survivals included winning these arguments with himself. With the keg under his arm, he ducked out of the raft's sun canopy that loosely covered the lifeboat like a tent. The other 4 sat around the fire. The dancing light of the flames played across their faces. It was unreal, like a movie scene. Luke guessed that he was interrupted a conversation. He picked up a coconut shell, careful not to spill a drop. From now on, let's use this keg to store our water. Good idea, said Liza. Hey, Luke, what do you think happened to Radford? Luke clenched the shell harder. Out of the 6 crew members who hadn't been too fond of the Phoenix make, Luke had the strongest feelings. Personally, I don't think about him at all, he replied sourly. But now that you mention it, I hope the biggest shark in the ocean swam up and bit his ugly head off. Radford had proved to be much more than just a seagoing bully. He was, with the boat crippled and slowly sinking, he had slipped off during the night in the schooner's 12-foot dignity, it's like another little boat to keep him safe. Ella, find something to do, ma'am. It's like another little lifeboat, and had left them to die, taking most of their food. In fact, he had left them to die. It had been that predicament and their efforts to restart the engine that had led to the explosion and the fire that had scuttled the ship. But do you think he made it back to Guam? Asked Charla. Ratface is an experienced sailor, Luke mused, emptying another shell, but he was in the open Pacific in a tiny boat. One good wave could have flipped him. He's fine, scoffed JJ. It's all part of the game. In your fantasy world, Charla added unkindly. Well, he would never could have survived from a real pile of popsicle sticks, the actor's son shrugged. His own BO would have killed him. Big joke. snorted Luke. That guy's as bad as the men from the plane. Worse, because he was getting paid to look after us. His wrist shook when he brought his lips to the coconut shell to suck out the spilled water. Just hearing his name makes me nuts. The five had decided to bed down in the inflatable raft boat. The sand on the beach was soft and comfortable, but 4 nights of ants bites had convinced them it was time for a new home. As the others retrieved to divvy up sleeping space, Liza remained outside to trim down their fire, a sensible precaution to avoid being noticed by the men on the other side of the island. It was an eerie feeling. Killers out there, somewhere in the blackness, almost too much to accept. After everything else that happened, murderers on the very same tiny cay where both groups of castaways had washed ashore. She saw a flicker of light coming from the woods. Her first reaction was panic. There it was them. She squinted into the gloom. Nothing. Were her eyes playing tricks on her? Suddenly, a hand reached out from behind and clamped down over her mouth. Her scream was smothered by a powerful grip. She struggled, but the attacker had too firm of a hold. And then a whisper in her ear, "Cut it out, Liza. It's me. Will?" If he hadn't been clutching her so tightly, she would have dropped like a stone in relief. "You're alive! What happened to you? Don't you remember the shipwreck?" The thoughts darted around her head. There was so much to say, but when she opened her mouth, she couldn't speak. Mute, she wheeled and embraced her brother. He resisted for an instant, then wrapped his arms around her. They held each other with an intensity that momentarily canceled out the danger, the horror, the fear. The small part of Liza, standing strangely distant from herself, noted that this was the first time she could ever remember hugging Will. She found her voice at last. "I can't believe it's you." Shh! He stiffened, pulled back. "They'll hear us. We've got to get out of here now." "Will, they're our friends." "Don't listen to them, Liza," Will warned. "Everything they say is a lie. They told me you were dead." "They thought I was," Liza reasoned. "I thought the same about them after the boat sank." "About you too." Clutching his torch, Will backed up a step, wide-eyed in shock. "They've got you brainwashed." "No." She stopped herself from arguing because, for the first time, she had gotten a really good look at her brother. He had lost weight. They all had. But his was much more noticeable on the sturdy Will. His hair was matted, his eyes were wild, and he had more bug bites than skin. A crude bow slung over his bony shoulder. He smelled terrible. He was like a savage, she thought in agony. She had no hope of reasoning with him. In fact, she could think of only one way to save him. "Luke!" she cried. "Everybody, come quick!" Shook by betrayal, Will turned to one. She lunged at him, wrapping her arms around his thin frame. He shook her off roughly. Her foot hooked on a low vine, and she fell heavily on the ground. He turned to face her. "I'll be back, Liza. I promise. I won't let them do this to you." By the time Luke and the others bust out of the lifeboat, he had fled into the jungle, the flicker of his torch disappearing into the density of the trees. So poor Will literally isn't even believing his own stinking sister. Like, she's like, "No, it's fine." And he's like, "No, it's not." And he ran away from her. Like, he's literally gone mad. Poor Will. Chapter 12, Day 4, 11:10 p.m. The jungle was becoming familiar to Will. Who would have dreamed that he would ever know one clump of ferns from another? But he did. No, that wasn't exactly true. The individual plants all looked alike, especially by torchlight. It was the progression that he was beginning to recognize. Coconut palms on the right, broadleaf Wachamachilla, whatever that big type of plant is, on the left. Big step over the fallen log, those weird crisscrossing ferns dead ahead. He was almost home. He felt a twinge of pride. He used to be the kid who fell apart when a cable went down and when the family ran out of microwave popcorn. An 80-minute power failure threw him into a panic, but now he was making his way through the dense jungle on his own in the near blackness of night. If only Liza could see him. She had seen him, he reminded himself, barely 10 minutes ago, and she had refused to come with. How was he going to rescue her? To rescue Liza, he thought, first had to rescue yourself. But how would he accomplish that? Where should he go? What should he do? For a moment, a silvery fog swirled around him once more. He closed his eyes and fought through it. When he opened them again, he was at the twin palms of his camp. He brushed a few handfuls of dried leaves onto the remains of the fire and reached down with his torch. The kindling caught quickly, and in the glow of the sudden flare, he saw that he was not alone. Dun, 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 dun. At first, the creature looked like a small haystack. Then the massive head swung around and whimpered. Will jumped. It was the wild boar. "Run for it!" He stood poised, waiting for the attack. It didn't come. The animal whimpered again. Will squinted in the firelight. Blood stained the bristly snout where the arrow had punctured it. His hands tightened on the bow over his shoulder and pulled an arrow from his pocket. He could kill the thing, kill it, and eat it. Yeah, right. You're too squeamish to dig out a splinter. He took another step forward. Careful, nothing more dangerous than a wounded animal. But this one was dying. Well, duh. That's why you shot it, right? So he's like literally having these battles with his brains. Ella, doesn't look like you're doing anything. We have to be doing something. Nothing's not an option. Cautiously, Will approached the boar and squatted down beside it. The red piggy's eyes seemed almost colorless now, sunken into the head, snout, body. He leaned over until he was close enough to feel the hot wind of the boar's tortured breathing. The animal regarded him suspiciously, but made no attempt to move. He reached out a hand and the boar sank from him, but it lacked the strength to get up. And when he closed his hands on the shaft of the arrow, the boar squealed in pain, shaking its snout. Luckily, the arrow pulled out smoothly and easily. There was no broadhead, there was no barded head, just sharpened point at the end. Fresh blood trickled from the hole. Why did he do this? This animal was protein and easy hunting too. Protein meant energy, and energy was what he needed to rescue Liza and figure out his way out of this mess. Will lifted the arrow into the bow and pulled back, straining to aim at the creature's neck. What neck? No neck at all. Its butt is practically an extension of the neck. He circled the boar, aiming behind its ears. It regarded him through the distance, colorless eyes. Will was sweating now. This Guam humidity always made him sweat, but now it was pouring off of him like Niagara Falls. Why couldn't he do it? It was stupid. He ate bacon cheeseburgers all the time. This was no different, except Will thought, when you go to McDonald's, you can't feel your dinner's hot breath on your legs before you eat it. He set down the bow. Tell you what, he set out to the boar. I'm going to find some more wood for the fire. You've got till I get back to beat it. But when he returned with an armload of twigs, the boar hadn't moved an inch. I'm going to take a little nap. If you're not gone by the time I wake up your dinner. Sleep would not come. He kept peeking through the half-closed eyelids of the boar, which were still in the spot by the fire. Will you get lost, raged Will. Don't you realize your life is on the line? But somewhere deep down, he had a sneaking suspicion that the boar was smarter than he was. Will glared at the animal. You don't think I've got the guts to do it. Well, you're wrong. You've got the rest of the night to scram. If you're still here at sunup, I'm having boar cutlets for lunch. In the morning, he awoke to find his legs numb and tingling. He looked down at the length of his body. The boar was fast asleep, curled up on his feet. So the boar did not leave. The boar's actually like snuggling with him. Oh, come on, boar, get off. He kicked himself free, struggled upright, and limped around trying to restore his circulation. The boar followed him like an adoring puppy. You're supposed to be gone. Will was half disgusted and half pleased. The boar rubbed against Will's leg, knocking him over with the sheer size and weight. Hey, cut it out, boar. Boar. Down he went, landing flat on his behind. I guess I'd better give you a name, he laughed. I can't just call you boar. Well, what do you call a hairy, squinty-eyed slob with no neck and a bad attitude? I know, he grinned, Pigface. A frown. Pigface fit to a T, but another name came to his mind. Ratface. That made no sense. His face was piggy, not ratty. Why did that name sound so right and so familiar? Ratface, he said out loud. The boar spit out a mouthful of chewed leaves and delivered a resounding belch. And rat-faced it remained. All right, we're going to stop there. So, oh snap. He's made friends with a wild pig, so that's cool. And Liza officially saw Will, knows he's alive. Ella, stop reading a book. You have so many missing assignments. You're doing that. So, at least Will's alive, but he's still crazy. The other 5 are together. We have not seen the murderer since. So, we will read more tomorrow.